Hi, I'm Susan Blain. Welcome to the Dare to Be Vulnerable project. Thanks so much for joining us. This is a safe place where we have courageous conversations around our mental health. Our focus for this project is to break the silence, bust the stigma, and remove the shame. Ultimately, we want to save lives by talking about our mental health. We're sharing stories from all walks of life, young, old, different cultural backgrounds, different sexual orientations. It doesn't matter where you've come from. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor or successful or not. It's a human thing. And it's a level playing field because mental health does not discriminate. So with this series, we're sharing our stories. And today's guest is a friend, and she's a powerful voice. Dancia is a daughter, a fiancée, and someone who lives with double depression, which is a combination of major depressive disorder and dysthymia, and also lives with a pre-diagnosis of borderline personality disorder from childhood trauma. Please welcome Dancia. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me here. I'm so glad to be here and to be speaking up about this.
Well, you've been speaking up about this for a long time.
Yeah.
I feel like you should be doing this.
Well, the work never stops, right?
Right.
So.
We said, you've been doing this since the age of 12. It just blows my mind. And I know a bit about your story. And what does, because mental health, a lot of people, when they hear it, they think of mental illness.
Yeah.
When I think of mental health, like I say, everybody has a mental health.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? What do you think about mental health? What's optimal mental health mean to you?
For me, mental health is almost like, a video game health bar, essentially. But instead of, what you visually see in terms of maybe a broken arm or a broken leg, like mental health is the health of your mind, of your soul, of your character and personality, right? You need to take care of it. You need to make sure you're checking in with yourself and your mental health to ensure that you can be the best you can be, essentially. And, what's optimal is really different for everybody. What works for me may not work for you. Like for me, I am a pretty short sleeper and I kind of love my work days and then after that a crash day type of thing. Whereas some other people may be like a 4 or 5 day work week and then having the weekends off. For me, it's that altering. Like it's just different for everybody. And what's optimal for you is not going to be optimal for the next person.
Let's talk about your story and who you think would best relate to your story. Every story is unique, like a fingerprint, right? No two are alike. But your story, who do you think would best relate to the story that you have around your mental health?
I imagine that a lot of very little kids, are not seeking a lot of mental health support or resources or know what mental health is. So I think my story actually helps moms more than anything, right? I started developing pretty bad depression when I was 4 or 5. That's when I started developing suicidal ideation as well. The first time I attempted suicide, I was 6 years old.
My God.
And, it's tough on me. It's tough on the person going through it. But I also can't imagine, my family and what they would have felt and the struggles that they would have had comprehending that, my, little girl is in this much pain.
Yeah.
Where, like every other little kid, I was afraid of death, but I was in so much pain that I just wanted it to end.
You're so brave. You're so brave. When did you first realize that you needed help or that you reached out for help? I know you started becoming an advocate when you were 12. I mean, that just blows my mind. It's just so powerful. But when did it kind of dawn on you that you needed help or that speaking out was helpful to you?
I think I've always known that there was something wrong going on in my life or in my own head that made me that way. I didn't really start seeking help until I was maybe in my teen years. But what originally got me started talking about suicide, depression, eating disorders, and mental illnesses, I remember being so frustrated about, suicide attempts that weren't really working. And I started searching up, okay, what's a pretty easy way to go about it where it wouldn't be super painful. I wouldn't have to worry about, ending up in the hospital and surviving type of thing. And that's when all these resources started popping up online, right? It's just like, if you're feeling suicidal, read this, go to this, here are resources. This is what mental health is. And that's when I started to really delve into it. So when I was 12 and I was advocating for mental health, it wasn't me speaking about my own personal stories at the time, but it was driven by my personal stories. So I was giving more so informative speeches when it came to suicide, depression, and eating disorders.
Wow, because your why was so strong. You know what why stands for, right? It's an acronym. What hurt you?
Yeah.
Right? That's what drives us.
Yeah.
And what heals us or what heals you is also part of the acronym. And that's what drives us too. So that's what was driving you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. What 3 things do you do now or did back then that really helped you? I say 3 things. You can share as many as you like, but that helped you navigate through.
Well, I do have that artistic side. So a lot of it was based in songwriting as well as poetry writing. A lot of my music was originally focused on the pain that I was feeling and having that cathartic expression. And then as I moved on, I'm like, okay, yes, my songs are gloomy and it's cathartic and everything, but I also need to change the way that I'm thinking as well and my approach, because obviously just letting out my emotions isn't helping me. It's not bettering me. So I started focusing on, okay, here's the negative, here's almost like creating a little story, and how to improve it and how to get out of that situation.
Nice. The hero's journey.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe like I wasn't necessarily out of it yet, and I was a character right in the middle of the muddy
storm.
parts. Exactly. But I knew that this was carving a path for me to get out, and that was incredibly helpful.
Yeah. And I know you still use your art, and I love the fact that you say, because we've had these courageous conversations a few times and on stage, and that you've learned how to harness the mental health challenges, or I've heard this term, mental health injuries. You've learned how to harness those into a superpower.
Yes.
I love that.
I definitely make it a strength rather than a weakness. And I'm a huge advocate of, taking a look at what deficits you have and trying to make a spin on that and making that your new strength.
I love that. I love that. Do you have any practices, like daily practices? That you...
I don't really have specific daily practices. I do have weekly practices, and it's more so making sure that, I have at least one date night with my fiance. I'm making sure that I am socializing with friends and not neglecting myself in that sort of way.
Yeah. It's important to plug in, especially these days. A lot of people are still isolated.
Yeah.
They talk about an isolation pandemic and social anxiety.
Yeah.
So you have to make that extra effort to make sure that you're out and connecting.
Yeah,
right?
for
The
sure.
power of connection.
Yeah, and with the new role that I've had within the past couple years, I had a lot of imposter syndrome, which made me really throw myself into my work. And for a few months there, I definitely neglected my social life, my partner, and
It's easy to do.
Yeah.
Easy to do.
And I noticed how much more difficult everything was and how inefficient that I was. I woke up one day where everything was just in pain, like laying in bed wherever my body was in contact with the mattress. It was so excruciatingly painful, and that's how burnt out I was.
Wow.
And I didn't even realize it.
So what have you been doing to avoid that?
Yes, I basically made like a strategic plan
Good.
for my personal life. And that includes making sure I have these social outings, making sure I am taking time for myself to read or, for a little bit of character development, and making sure I do little tiny things every week or every month to make sure I have that balance of everything in my life.
Keep that on track to make sure that you're on that spectrum for mental health, that you're keeping the dial moving towards optimal mental health.
Yes.
Right? We've got to put the effort in, right? It doesn't just happen. I like to talk about a toolbox.
Yeah.
And I'd go into my toolbox and I pull out some tools that I need when I'm struggling.
Yeah.
That help me get back on track and help me move the dial.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I love that. There are people watching, us sharing our stories and this conversation today, and that may be struggling.
Yeah.
And what would you say to them if they're struggling right now?
Well,
what piece of advice would you have?
I struggled with suicidal ideation for about 17 years, and I finally got out of it in the past 2 years. I did not think I would ever get out of it, especially since I had it since I was so young, and that it was just, felt like never ending. It was almost 2 decades. Yeah. And given that I'm, 24, that's a huge portion of my life.
Huge.
So the fact that I got out, I want other people to have that hope and realize that you can also get out. You're going to have days where you still feel sad. Maybe you're going to be depressed, but you don't have to feel this level of pain every single day for the rest of your life. Even if you have been living this way for the past 2 decades, 3 decades, change can happen.
How important is talking about it?
It's definitely helped me in a cathartic way, but also to reevaluate myself and my experiences. I recently wrote an article basically about this experience as well. And someone, I wasn't really close to him, but he basically talked about, oh, it's so great that you're this resilient and all that type of thing. And I hadn't actually thought about myself as an actual character within my story. I know that sounds really weird, but my focus had always been the actual depression aspect, the illness itself. But I didn't realize until very recently how much effort that I actually put into myself and how much I have gotten myself to grow. And I haven't given myself the time to be proud of myself and to appreciate myself in that way. So even to this day, I'm still learning, and talking about it is helping me understand that. Yeah.
And even just saying it, I'm proud of myself for the work I've done, right?
Yeah.
It's really powerful. I know. I'm older than you, and I'm just starting to do that. So I hear you. And it's so important, it's so important. And to build a community of support around you. And I know you have that too.
Yeah, that's another big change that I've had in the past couple of years. Basically, when my fiance came into my life, he gave me a nice, safe place for me to process all of my trauma and kind of move and grow from that. And then that allowed me to, accomplish quite a bit in my work and my humanitarian efforts. And then that's how I met Haley Hetchman, and she has been an absolute rock. She introduced me to her circle of friends, and that has completely rewired the way that I think and perceive the world, and how open I am with friends and how comfortable I am with people.
I love that. And your community will just grow more and more.
Yes.
Dancia. Your participation in this project is so powerful. Your voice is so powerful. And I'm so grateful to you.
Thank you. And I'm also glad that by doing this, I got to meet you. I got to meet the other amazing people that you're interviewing. And these connections are just so lovely, and like nothing can replace this. These connections.
And we're all in it together, right? Because we all share something in common, right? And we all dare to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
So it makes us family. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, I love these conversations. I hope you've heard something here today that's inspired you. And join us. Check us out on daretobevulnerable.com. Check out some of our other stories. Maybe you have a story that you'd like to share. Share this story. Like it. Share it with your community. Let's keep the conversations going. That's what this is all about. We want to do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these stories from all walks of life. Ultimately, breaking that silence, busting that stigma, removing the shame, and just making talking about mental health commonplace, as it should be. We encourage you to dare to be vulnerable in your life. Reach out, have a courageous conversation if you're struggling, or walk with someone who is. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.